Last winter, something happened that still wakes me up in the middle of the night. My name is Jack, and I'm a school teacher. My wife Linda is a nurse, and we both thought we knew how to handle unexpected situations. But on this particularly snowy night, we found ourselves in real trouble, and I'm still not sure how we managed to find a way out. We were driving back from a family gathering in our old, sturdy SUV. The snow was coming down hard, making the highway barely visible. This wasn't just any snow, it was a fierce blizzard, the kind that could bury your tires in snow in minutes. We were in rural Minnesota, and let me tell you, it feels a lot more isolated and eerie when every familiar landmark is smothered by the relentless snowfall. As we drove, the wind howled outside, and the only thing cutting through the night was our headlights. That night, as we drove at around 40 miles per hour, the road seemed endless, and the storm seemed intent on swallowing us whole. Just when we thought the road couldn't get any more desolate, our headlights caught a figure in the distance. At first, it was just a shadow against the swirling snow, but as we got closer, the figure became clearer. A man, standing alone on the side of the highway. He was waving his arms, trying to flag us down. Linda glanced at me, her eyes filled with concern. "Should we stop?" she asked, her voice barely above the howl of the wind. I slowed the car, hesitating. Every instinct told me to keep driving, to leave the stranger to the mercy of the storm. But then I thought of the fierce cold, and the fact that no one deserved to be left out in that. "Let's at least see if we can help him," I said, not fully convinced of my own decision. As we pulled up beside him, the man rushed towards us, his face half covered by a scarf, his eyes wide with what looked like fear, or maybe desperation. He was younger than us, probably in his mid-30s, and shivering violently. "Thank you so much for stopping," he said, his voice shaking either from the cold or nervousness. "My car broke down a mile back, and I've been walking to find help. Can you give me a lift to the nearest town?" We agreed, letting him into the back seat. As we drove off, I noticed his quick, relieved sigh. But there was something about him that didn't quite sit right with me. Maybe it was the way he kept glancing at the door lock, or how he avoided our questions about where he was coming from. Whatever it was, as the snow continued to fall and the wind screamed around us, a sense of dread began to build in my chest. Mike sat wrapped up in his coat, his eyes darting around like he was scared of every snowflake that hit the windows. Something about him just didn't feel right. The first thing that made us uneasy was how Mike kept looking over his shoulder, as if he expected someone to jump out of the snow and chase us. "Are you okay back there?" I asked, trying to sound calm. Mike just nodded quickly and forced a smile, but his eyes were wide and alert. "Where do you need to go?" Linda asked, her voice gentle. Mike just mumbled something about a place up ahead, not giving any real details. When Linda pressed a little more, asking why he was out here in such a storm, Mike brushed off the question. "Just needed to get away for a bit," he said, but his voice was shaky, and he wouldn't meet her eyes. Linda and I exchanged a worried look. Something didn't add up. If his car had broken down, where was his phone? Why was he so vague about where he was going? And then Linda noticed something else that made us even more suspicious. Despite the raging blizzard outside, Mike's clothes were almost completely dry, and he didn't have any snow on him, not even on his shoes. It was as if he hadn't been outside at all before we picked him up. "I noticed you don't have much with you," Linda said, trying to sound casual. "No bag or anything." Mike just shrugged. "Rushed out in a hurry," he replied quickly. The air in the car felt colder, heavier, as if the storm outside had crept into the space between us. The wind howled louder, and as I kept driving, I started feeling that we might be in real trouble. As I focused on the road, Linda was quietly scrolling through her phone. Suddenly, she froze, her eyes fixed on the screen. She leaned over and whispered, showing me her phone. There was a wanted poster, and the man in the picture was Mike, our passenger. The alert said he was wanted for a violent robbery. My heart sank. The danger we sensed was real, and it was sitting right behind us. I knew we had to act fast. Facing directly in front of me, I mouthed to Linda to just go along with it. Pretending to struggle with the steering, I maneuvered our SUV into a snowbank, making it seem like we were stuck. I pretended to sound panicked as I told Mike that I think we are stuck and that I need his help to push the car. Mike grunted and opened the door, stepping out into the howling wind. As soon as he moved to the back of the vehicle, Linda quickly locked all the doors. I watched him through the rearview mirror as he placed his hands on the back of the SUV and pushed. After a few seconds, he stopped and tried the door handle. It was locked. His face twisted into anger, and he started pounding on the window furiously. "Open the door! Now!" he yelled, his voice muffled by the storm but still filled with threat. That's when we saw it, a handgun tucked into the belt of his jeans. I had to keep calm. "Just a minute, Mike. We're trying to figure this out," I shouted back, trying to buy some time. I told Linda to put her head down, and I did the same as I slammed my foot on the accelerator and clumsily made my way back onto the road and started pulling away, leaving Mike in a cloud of spraying snow. I couldn't help myself and looked back for a brief moment. Mike was just standing there, the gun pulled at us, but he did not shoot. Still, I didn't slow down until we were safely miles away. The constant drone of the SUV's engine and the relentless howl of the blizzard filled the car, mirroring the turmoil we felt inside. Linda was visibly shaken, and so was I. The reality of how narrowly we had escaped a potentially deadly situation weighed heavily on us. I couldn't stop thinking about the different tragic ways it could have turned out if we hadn't acted as quickly as we did. We were indeed fortunate. The snow continued to fall, seemingly less menacing now compared to the human danger we had just escaped. Our conversation turned to the importance of listening to our instincts. We resolved to be more cautious in the future, agreeing that picking up strangers during a blizzard or at all was a risk we would never take again. The drive home was quieter after that, the experience binding us together in a new, solemn way. It was a stark reminder of how unpredictable and precarious the world can be. We knew this night would always be a vivid memory, a night that taught us the critical importance of trusting our instincts and the need for caution when something doesn't feel right. It was an especially cold morning in early December. I woke up before dawn, determined to make the most of the day. Since retiring after 25 years on the force, I've taken to spending most of the winter ice fishing. There's something soothing about the peace and quiet of a frozen lake, with just the scattered fishing shacks, the occasional distant hum of a snowmobile, and nature all around. As I packed my truck with gear, my trusty fishing rods, a thermos filled with hot coffee, and some hearty sandwiches, I felt a familiar thrill. The day promised solitude and serenity, a sharp contrast to my former life as a detective, where chaos and noise were more the norm than the exception. Driving through the still dark morning to the secluded lake in northern Wisconsin, the headlights of my truck cut through the thick curtain of falling snow. The roads were deserted, making me the lone traveler heading towards a day of icy isolation. It was the perfect setting for a man who had spent his career unraveling mysteries and facing down danger, now seeking nothing more than the quiet tug of a fish on the line. As I settled into my spot on the ice, the quiet of the morning was perfect, just the way I liked it. But as I began to set up my equipment, something unusual caught my eye. There were several fresh vehicle tracks on the snow leading up to the lake, ending at a small shack not far from where I was fishing. This was odd, especially since the shack was normally empty during such harsh weather, and few ventured out here when a storm was brewing. Aware of my habit to overanalyze, I decided to let it go and cast my line into the freezing water. I was ready for a peaceful day of fishing, hoping to catch something good. But the peace was short-lived. A sudden tug on my line made me think I had a fish, but when I reeled in, I jumped with surprise when I saw a piece of clothing, torn and stained with blood, hooked to my lure. It was certainly recent. No way had it been in the water long enough to be forgotten or lost in an innocent accident. I looked around, the isolation of the lake suddenly feeling more ominous than serene. Compelled by old habits, I decided to investigate. As I approached the nearby shack, quiet sounds reached my ears, faint but definitely human. I crept closer and noticed more signs that someone had been there very recently. There were fresh boot prints on the snow, and a cigarette, still lit, lay smoldering on the ground. These were clear indications that the shack wasn't as abandoned as I had thought. Someone was here, and the blood-stained clothing tangled on my line suggested they might not want company. I edged closer to the shack, my old detective instincts fully awakened, ready to confront whatever was waiting inside. Just as I reached for the door, it burst open, and a man with wild eyes and a scruffy beard lunged at me. In his hand, he brandished a knife, glinting ominously in the weak winter light. "Stay out of this," he hissed, waving the knife to emphasize his point. His sudden aggression made it clear that whatever he was involved in, it was dangerous. I backed away slowly, not wanting to escalate the situation, but knowing I couldn't just leave. Once I was a safe distance away, I used my old detective skills to devise a plan. I began to create a series of distractions. I knocked over a nearby bucket and shuffled some equipment around to make noise, hoping to draw the man out onto the ice, where I had a better chance of handling him without the close confines of the shack. As expected, the man couldn't ignore the commotion. Driven by paranoia, or perhaps thinking he could easily overpower me, he charged out of the shack and onto the ice, his eyes filled with fury. The lake was vast and open, and he seemed convinced that he could end this confrontation without any witnesses. As he approached, the icy surface under our feet turned the chase into an odd dance. Suddenly, the man's foot slipped, and his knife clattered across the ice, skidding out of reach. Seizing the moment, I tackled him to the ground. We struggled, our movements erratic on the slippery ice, each trying to gain the upper hand. Our scuffle didn't go unnoticed. A distant hum grew louder, and I glimpsed a snowmobiler approaching. The rider had seen the fight and was quickly heading our way. Realizing help was on its way, I used every ounce of strength to keep the criminal subdued on the cold, hard ice. As I struggled to keep the man pinned down on the ice, the snowmobiler reached us, quickly assessing the situation. He stayed back a safe distance but acted swiftly, pulling out a satellite phone from his pocket. I could hear him speaking urgently, describing our location and what he was witnessing. The sound of his voice, calm and collected, gave me a slight reassurance. The perpetrator writhed under my grip, trying to break free, but the fear of getting caught seemed to drain his energy. We were both breathing heavily, our breaths visible in the frigid air, mixing with the falling snow. It didn't take long for the sound of sirens to cut through the howling wind. A police vehicle, followed by another, appeared on the shoreline, their lights flashing brightly against the white landscape. Officers, well equipped for the icy conditions, quickly made their way toward us, their steps cautious but determined on the slippery surface. As they approached, I finally let go of the man, standing back as the officers took over. They handcuffed him and led him away, his head bowed, no longer posing a threat. The snowmobiler explained what he had seen, and I added details about the earlier encounter and the evidence I had found. With the criminal now securely in police custody, the tension I had felt began to ebb away, replaced by a deep, weary relief. As the police car drove away with the man, I turned to thank the snowmobiler who had come to my aid. "Thanks for your help," I said, appreciating his calm approach in such a tense situation. Standing there, on the cold, quiet lake, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the detective skills I had developed over the years. Those skills had helped capture the criminal and kept me safe today. Reflecting on the day's events, I decided not to dig deeper into who the man was or what he might have been up to. It was time for me to truly step back and distance myself from my past life as a detective. Today had shown me that while my skills were still useful, I needed to learn to enjoy my retirement without getting pulled back into the world of crime and investigation. It was time to embrace the peace I had earned. Last winter, I faced a scary experience in the mountains that I'll never forget. My name is Emily. I'm in my late 20s and pretty new to hiking. I liked exploring, but I didn't know much about surviving in tough situations. One day, I decided to hike a less popular trail in the Rocky Mountains. It's a beautiful place, but the weather can change very quickly and become dangerous. It was supposed to be a simple, half-day hike. I started early in the morning. The weather was clear and very cold, and there was a light layer of snow on the ground. The trail went through forests of pine trees covered in snow. Everything was quiet and peaceful. I didn't know that a sudden snowstorm was coming that would test everything I knew about staying safe in the mountains. As I started my way down the mountain, the weather took a sudden turn for the worse. What began as a gentle snowfall quickly became a fierce blizzard. The snow fell so thick and fast that I could barely see a few feet in front of me. My map fluttered uselessly in my hands. It was no help in these blinding conditions. Feeling anxious, I tried to stick to the trail, but the overwhelming snow made it hard to see any path at all. Before I knew it, I had wandered off the main route. That's when I stumbled upon something unsettling. A hidden camp cluttered with animal traps, some with creatures still caught in them, and tools that poachers use. There were also hides of animals that looked like they had been recently skinned. It was clear that this was a spot used for illegal hunting. As I stood there, shocked by what I found, I suddenly heard voices. Panicked, I quickly ducked behind some bushes near the camp. Peering through the branches, I saw a group of tough-looking men armed with rifles walking towards the camp. They were talking loudly about their poaching, discussing what they had caught and what they planned to do next. They hadn't seen me yet, but I knew I was in real danger if they did. Holding my breath, I decided it was time to sneak away before they noticed me. As I carefully moved, trying to be as silent as possible, my foot hit a twig. The loud snap echoed through the quiet, snowy forest like a gunshot. I froze, and so did the men. When they turned their heads in my direction, I knew I had no choice but to run. I dashed into the dense, snow-covered trees as fast as my legs could carry me. Behind me, I could hear the poachers shouting and chasing after me. My heart pounding, I felt a surge in adrenaline as I became laser-focused on running as fast as I could. That's when a gunshot rang out. The bullet whizzed past my head, so close I could almost feel it cut through the air. The realness of the danger hit me then. I wasn't just lost, I was being hunted. Using what little I knew about the area, I made a quick decision to cause a diversion. As I ran, I grabbed a heavy branch covered in snow and pulled it down as I passed, releasing a mini avalanche of snow behind me. The falling snow created a temporary barrier, slowing the poachers just long enough for me to put some distance between us. Breathing hard and scared, I spotted a small cave off to the side of the trail. I quickly slipped inside, pressing myself against the cold, dark walls. I could hear the poachers moving closer, their voices growing louder as they searched. They were talking about finding the girl who knows too much, which made me shiver even more. I stayed as quiet as I could, barely daring to breathe, hoping they would pass by without checking the cave. The fear of being found was overwhelming, every sound outside the cave sending a spike of panic through me. I started thinking about my parents and how worried they would be. I thought this was it for me. I was sure I wouldn't get out of this situation. But then, in the middle of my fear, I heard a different sound. Something that wasn't the wind or the voices of the poachers. It was the distant sound of skis slicing through the snow. Without thinking too much about the risk, I knew it was my chance. I carefully peeked out of the cave and saw a group of backcountry skiers gliding down a nearby slope. I left my hiding spot and ran towards them as fast as I could, waving my arms frantically to get their attention. The skiers saw me and quickly skied over. I blurted out what was happening, and they didn't hesitate. They understood the danger immediately and led me away at a fast pace, their skis making quick work of the terrain that had slowed me down on foot. The poachers, not equipped for fast movement in the deep snow, couldn't keep up. Thanks to the skiers' quick actions and knowledge of the area, we soon outpaced the poachers and made our way safely down the mountain. After everything settled down, I spent a lot of time reflecting on how close I had come to real danger. I was thankful for the bit of survival knowledge I had, which undoubtedly helped me escape. The ordeal made me realize that danger could lurk anywhere, even on a tranquil mountain trail during a serene snowfall. This frightening experience taught me the importance of preparation and caution. I decided to take additional safety courses and always ensure I was fully prepared for any scenario while hiking. Moreover, I reported the poachers' camp to the authorities to prevent future illegal activities. Determined to avoid any similar risks, I chose never to hike on that particular trail again. It's crucial to remain vigilant and prepared, enabling me to continue enjoying my hiking adventures safely.